Hey Crossbridge, it's Wednesday, it's time for your s.o.a.p update. We are now in the prophet of Daniel, and this is one of those prophets, or one of the books that we'll say that was written while the Israelites were in exile, when they were taken away, where we kind of left it off in Jeremiah. And this book is filled with a lot of different stories that you may be familiar with, and today was one of those stories. And I want to highlight today the value of a name and how important a name is. When Babylon came in and took over for the first time, they took all of the best of the best out of Israel, brought it to their nation, and they begin to do what's kind of like weeding out people. And you saw that in Daniel chapter 1 and 2, where they tried to get the best of the best and train them up. Daniel and his friends do so well. You've got Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who do so well just by eating all those veggies that the king continues to elevate them. And as Daniel moves up, he brings his boys along with him. In chapter 3, we see that there is going to be an issue that these elevated, now they're almost like citizens of Babylon. They have these great roles. These three men that followed Daniel are going to find themselves being thrown into a prison or into a furnace that's so hot it's going to kill the king's men that threw them in. How do you get to a place where you've been elevated and seen as someone of value, and then you go and get thrown in the furnace? I think it all comes with the power of a name and how we use our words. You see, when Babylon took over, we tell this story as the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's their Babylonian names, but Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are their Hebrew names. And King Nebuchadnezzar, in the beginning of chapter 3, has elevated himself as a god-like person, and he builds this statue to be worshipped by everyone who would see it. And it's a huge moment. Everyone's supposed to bow down to it. And there comes a moment that he sends out a herald, someone to announce. And in verse 4 it says, "Then a herald shouted out, 'People of all races, all nations and languages, listen to the king's command.'" He is now gathering, and he's conquered so many places that he's looking for people of all races, all nations, and all language. He's elevating himself up, saying, my name should be at the center. My image should be at the center. And if those three phrases sound familiar to you, it's because we've also heard them in Revelation chapter 14, where the Apostle John is imprisoned on this island called Patmos, and he receives this vision from God. And in chapter 14, we read, "And I saw another angel flying through the sky, carrying the eternal good news to proclaim to the people who belong to this world, to every nation, tribe, language, and people." We have two different stories here. One of the king who's elevating himself, and one of this angel speaking of God carrying the good news to all nations and tribes and tongues. One puts themselves at the center, one puts Christ at the center. And these both lead to different places. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego find themselves in the furnace because they would not bow down to an idol. It was part of their culture and what they knew from their 10 commandments, that they should have no idols before God, anything set up in that place. And they're not bowing down. And when the king says, "If you do not do this, I'm going to go nuts on you," they're like, "Listen, you can do what you want, but God is still in control of our lives. Whether we live or we die, we're going to honor him." And when they throw them into the furnace, the king looks in and he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Boys, we threw 3 in there. Why is there 4? Why? Where did an extra come in? They're not even bound anymore. And when they pull them out of the furnace, only 3 come out. And it says that their hair wasn't singed. Their clothes didn't smell like smoke. They were completely fine. And they tell the king, this is what God does, right? No other God can rescue like this. And the king then does what? He promotes them because of their faith in this God. And in the Aramaic text, or many Old Testament gatherings in these scrolls, chapter 4, verses 1, 2, and 3 are actually a continuation of chapter 3. And I think it's better placed there than the way that we see it here, where it's chapter 4, verse 1, 2, and 3. So you probably didn't read this morning. But here's the thing. After the king sees all this, he says this: "King Nebuchadnezzar sent his message to the people of every race and nation and language throughout the world." Here's what he says: "Peace and prosperity to you, I want you all to know about the miraculous signs and wonders the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs, how powerful his wonders. His kingdom will last forever, his rule through all generations. He went from putting himself at the center now to putting this God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego at the center, saying these guys had it right. Things aren't going to end well for Nebuchadnezzar, but that's tomorrow. You get to journey through that, and Friday. But for now, I want you to kind of camp in this thinking, how do I use the Lord's name? How do I view names in my words? Am I putting myself at the center or God at the center? Am I proclaiming people to worship what I've done or what he is doing? Crossbridge, may all we do point back to Jesus. May we show up as the blessing, not to be blessed.